Okay, Halo 2 LASO was hard enough as it was, and not too long ago we decided we were going to try to step it up and do something potentially even harder, where we would play Halo 2 LASO, which is Legendary All Skulls On, but actually literally have All Skulls On, because the Halo 2 LASO playlist only requires you to have most of the skulls on. And just a quick warning, there are a few flashing light moments coming up in the video, so I just want to give anyone who might need to know about that a heads up. So we wanted to crank it up to 100 and put all 33 skulls on. And if you haven't watched the first part of this video, go check it out after this video. It doesn't matter what order you watch it in. But oh boy, is playing Halo 2 Legendary with literally all skulls on quite an ordeal. Quickly we learned some levels are a little bit easier having access to certain skulls like the Scarab skull, and other levels are absolutely close to impossible because of combinations of skulls like the Scarab skull with Feather, Sputnik, Boom, and Tough Luck just yeeting our enemies away from us. This one has definitely been a very big roller coaster, and we've spent the past month or so trying to resolve some of the big issues and roadblocks we were running into with Halo 2 LLASO since last time, and the things we found only have made things maybe more complicated than before. Hey, listen, before we get into today's video, wanna know how you can get $25 of free stuff, specifically ramen-related stuff? Well, fortunately enough, Vite Ramen has the hookup for you guys because they sponsored today's video, which honestly is always really exciting whenever we get to work with a company like Vite Ramen, because not only do you guys get great tasting, healthy ramen, like seriously, this is some top quality stuff sent right to your door, but Luke and I also get to pay our bills, and that's always fun. And if you're a fan of Rocket Sloth and you want to help support the channel, the best way to do that is to support the sponsors who support us directly, and Vite Ramen is literally known for having a great reputation in the gaming community. They've done some really awesome things lately. Their ramen is healthy and it tastes great. What more is there to say here? Right now, when you order a bundle, you get $25 of free stuff included in your bundle. And seriously, 2022 is a big year for Vite Ramen. They're becoming really popular and everything's in really high demand. So you might notice in the store some things are between limited quantities and some made to order status. So you definitely want to jump on and get your orders placed as soon as possible so you could be eating this great ramen quickly too. Once again, a huge thank you to the guys at Vite Ramen for supporting our content, sponsoring Rocket Sloth, and of course, providing our audience with some cool ramen. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back into this. Last time you may remember, we were stuck on the Halo 2 level, the Oracle, because for whatever reason, our game would continuously crash when we tried to make our way down the elevator. We were having crashing issues already on Sacred Icon, but we were able to bypass them, and we did come up with a theory that if we could maybe avoid shooting the Scarab gun, we would be able to bypass the elevator section on the Oracle, preventing the level from crashing. And we jumped in and we definitely tried this strategy and we used grenades quite a bit, but this section alone is so frustratingly hard to bypass, especially at the mid to halfway point where you have to stop using the Scarab gun and start throwing grenades in hopes to not crash this level. And even at that point, we weren't 100% sure that the Scarab gun is what was causing the level itself to crash. So while the Oracle was a level that we saw as a massive roadblock that we were gonna have to test a ton of different things out to see how we can bypass it without crashing, we did decide to move ahead with our playthrough a little bit more just to see if the other levels of Halo 2 would work, or if we'd run into the same crashing issues that we ran into here on the Oracle. Because if the whole game is just gonna crash after this, there's no point in us really digging in and trying to beat Oracle if we're gonna run into the same problem over and over and over again, making this whole thing impossible. So next we were going on to Delta Halo, and starting things off, things were looking okay. There weren't any instant crashes though. We had to kind of get back into our heads that yeah, we need to try to survive this whole thing, because seriously, the enemies are pretty brutal in this opening area. This first section is by far the hardest first section in any of the levels we had done LLASO so far. Just right out of the get-go, we were just getting gunned down by everything. We had to be very careful using our Scarab gun because we could blast ourselves, or just in general, we were getting shot at by so many different enemies right away. We pretty much had to spend a big chunk of time memorizing where all the enemies were, all the grunts, all the jackals, and make sure we were hitting them precisely and quickly so they wouldn't make a push on us and kill us. And we did die many times here before we were eventually able to clear out the enemies fast enough. It just became this pinpoint accuracy memorization to try to move through this part. Now, typically in our regular LASO run, we would just run out of bounds and run all the way over to the mid section of the level, hit some trigger points, and then grab a ghost and drive out of bounds, going in different directions and hitting different trigger points. However, since there is the jacked skull enabled in this version of Halo 2 LASO, we aren't able to jump into a ghost unless we're hijacking it off of another enemy, which is hard enough in its own. So we decided just to try to tank our way through, taking out the enemies along the way. The jackal snipers out here were a little bit of a pain, just picking us off right away, and that was kind of annoying, but we did manage to clear them and move up some more, getting a checkpoint. And overall, the rest of this level wasn't the worst thing. It definitely took us a little bit of time to push forward, kill enemies, not die, hope we didn't die, and tried to avoid just the random stuff that would kill us. The enemies over here were a little bit tricky, but fortunately enough, we were able to just blast them off. We made sure to take out that shade turret, which killed us a couple of times. And then we had to try to activate the bridge, which while we did shoot into the main area where all of the enemies are inside the structure, we decided to play it safe and just trigger the bridge from the outside, which did help a little bit. And then from there, we crossed the bridge, taking out the enemies on the other side. Then we had the big long walk up the hill where all of these ghosts come charging at you when you're in the inside of the ruins. We thought about hijacking them, but we didn't really think it was that practical where we were in the level. So instead, we just tried to blast them before they got too close, where they would just instantly kill us. We had to watch out for this little group of grunts over in this corner, and pushing our way through this next area was a little bit tricky. This section we did get stuck at for quite a while after we made our way across this courtyard. Just the way that the enemies are spawned in here and how they push in was pretty frustrating at times, but we weren't down and out yet. We were still making consistent progress and nothing had crashed yet, so we're feeling confident enough with how far we were getting. Pushing ourselves into the ruins was pretty brutal because there's a lot of enemies, it's very close quarters, and once again, we started running into that big issue that we complained about in our last video where debris just launches itself up and gets in your face and blasts you back and just instantly kills you for whatever reason, or just randomly you think you're doing the right thing and then you just get killed in the process. Things did step up a little bit after we got past the indoor section and we were kind of in that little alleyway outdoor tree area with all the jackals. This part's pretty brutal, and even if you think you know where all the enemies are, more enemies run out as you progress closer and it could just be this death pit. Fortunately enough, after multiple tries of just going for it and hoping that the best thing could happen, surprisingly ended up actually being the strategy that got us past this part, and we pushed through the cave getting a checkpoint. Now, the next section that did give us a little bit of trouble was fighting off the last set of elites inside of the end section of this level. For whatever reason, we found out if both of us push up down the bridge, buggers will spawn, and those things will just kill us instantly. So the best way to bypass that is one player stayed behind while the other player pushed up, and the buggers just, interestingly enough, don't spawn. So all we had to worry about were the 4 or so honor guard elites indoors who want to murder us, and we had to do our best to try to take them all out. I died so many times here, I can't even remember. It was just a lot of death for a very long time and not a lot of progress made. Eventually, I did come up with this strategy where I would try to shoot in, whip around, and shoot at another side, which seemed to work a little bit. And then if they were chasing me still, I'd run up the hill and hope that Luke could save me. And even then, I still died a few times. However, after getting really good at just maneuvering around this end section and trying to move quickly, we did manage to kill all of the honor guards in the room by me doing a little fake out, a little running, a little punching. We did bypass this level. So we're back on track. We were optimistic. We knew that at least Delta Halo didn't seem overtly broken. So with that in mind, we decided we should move ahead and try to see if there's any big red flags on this run before we jump on it and we spend all this time doing Regret, which shares the same BSP as Delta Halo. So we jumped a little bit ahead in the campaign to test out Uprising, which shares the same BSP as the final level, The Great Journey, but this level already is pretty easy to beat in any scenario. So Luke and I just timed up our grenades and made sure that the person who still had shields at the very beginning, as with all of the skulls on, our shields are constantly decaying, would quickly get a launch high enough to make it all the way on top of the mountain. From there, one of our favorite tricks in Halo 2, if you just walk down the mountain and you crouch right here, you automatically end the level. And fortunately enough, we're able to do that much without anything crashing. So maybe things are looking up a little bit. So next, we decided to jump onto Quarantine Zone to test out this level because at this point we were maybe having a theory that this might be a problem that is BSP based, or essentially the map load-ins themselves. We crashed a ton on the Arbiter, and then we crashed a ton on the Oracle. So if Uprising works, we can probably deduce that maybe the Great Journey will work, though we didn't spend too much time on Uprising. And since we got through Delta Halo, maybe Regret will work since it shares a similar map. It's just theory based at this point. So we decided to test out Quarantine Zone, which maybe could be a tell if Sacred Icon would have problems as well. So we loaded up on Quarantine Zone, and right away things are pretty chaotic. We can't jump in a vehicle because of the skull not letting us jump in a vehicle unless we hijack something. So we have to kind of run through these doors and hope we don't get murdered right away. When we got to the big open area, there's definitely a lot of stuff going on. There's enemies everywhere, and we kind of just tried to take it slow and pick off the enemies with whoever had the Scarab gun at that time actually working. But without too much trial and error and clearing through this section, we did die a few times, which was a little bit annoying. We actually realized that, yeah, this level also crashed pretty quickly and consistently. What we did notice though is while this whole time we were thinking that the crash was a result of the Scarab gun, it wasn't necessarily the case. The level itself was actually crashing due to some sort of overall overload. We don't know if it has something to do with that really confusing salt mechanic that counts up the numbers of items that are loaded in at a single time, or something to do with just the velocity of items in the physics engine just moving around and the game trying to do really quick math to figure out what's going on. But it was very clear that this explosion of a ghost was the straw that broke the Halo 2's proverbial back and caused it to crash, as we could hear the little winding up of the ghost about to explode, and then just everything crashed. And mind you, these aren't hard crashes that kick us all the way out of the game. They just bring us back to the menu, which is very interesting, makes us think that this is likely a Halo 2 side thing rather than just an MCC error, though it very well could be an MCC error with just what goes on in MCC sometimes. So we're kind of stuck again with Halo 2 Anniversary LLASO, as we've been journeying through this for multiple months now, trying to figure out where and how we can progress. Not only is this a very difficult challenge that we're failing here because we literally can't progress, when we can progress, it's incredibly difficult. So there's a lot at stake here. So to recap, Cairo Station was completable. Outskirts of Metropolis, we were able to get through. The Arbiter crashed multiple times, though eventually we did have a run where we cleared. Then we got to the Oracle, which of course we've talked about this one in our studies of trying to figure out how to progress. We're still struggling to find how we can get both of ourselves down safely without using or being overly reliant on the Scarab gun. We did make a new discovery though while we were testing all of these theories. We sent Dim, who honestly is just really good at Halo, into the Oracle solo with all 33 skulls on. Now mind you, a couple of the skulls are co-op only skulls, so he does have a little bit of an advantage, like the slightest advantage. Obviously he doesn't have to switch off weapons, and he doesn't have to worry about his health decaying and not being able to shoot and vice versa. And while we did warn him about what happens down the elevator, he was able to progress past the elevator section when playing solo, and matter of fact, he was able to go through and complete the rest of the level without having any major crashes along the way, which of course doubles down on our theory that the reason that the Oracle isn't working here is possibly a co-op related issue. Now, the obvious solution would be for Luke and I just to split up, play it solo, and progress from there. However, for the spirit of using all 33 skulls, some of these skulls are intended to play with the co-op mode on. So moving forward, we might send Dim off on some journeys to see what levels can be completed with almost all 33 skulls on, so we can get a bigger picture of what an LLASO run would look like, though we're still stuck with the Oracle being a pretty big roadblock along the way. Okay, let's continue on. Now we know that Delta Halo was completable, which means that in our next set of level runs that we're going to do for this series, we are going to go ahead and give Regret a try. Hopefully it doesn't crash, because Regret is already one of the hardest LASO levels, so for Regret to fall apart in an LLASO run and crash if we're hours and hours into it will be absolutely heartbreaking. After all of the crashes that we had with Quarantine Zone, we decided to test out Sacred Icon to see if we could progress through that level, and surprisingly enough, we actually were able to make it through the level, which went against what we were theorizing for this part. Now, Sacred Icon itself wasn't a level we were too worried about, because even the regular LASO was just a little bit of trial and error. We felt like we didn't have the adequate firepower to kill the Flood at times, where this time around, we definitely had more than enough with the Scarab gun. It was just a matter of hoping that the game didn't crash. Just getting past the annoying blowing ourselves up because some random dust particle flies in front of our screen and causes the Scarab gun to explode in front of us wasn't the best, but otherwise we were moving along. Interestingly enough, we noticed that at certain times it would let us both shoot at the same time. It's really confusing because we do have all 33 skulls on. Why was it just letting us both shoot back there a second ago? We didn't really know why this was happening, but I stuck with a plasma pistol and never once through the whole level did it take away my shooting ability. So I became the designated shooter and I just led the way with the plasma pistol, and Luke a lot of the time just stood back and let me try to clear the area so we could move up together. At one point there was this jackal that was just kind of chilling. He was a friendly jackal, and I guess because all of the skulls were on, there's something was set up in the way where his shield just deflected every single thing that could possibly hurt him. And he survived the longest time. He just chilled with us and vibed with us through the first half of the level before just letting us move on without him, but we were really surprised that he even followed us as far as he did. We were a little bit worried about those giant things, those reinforcers I think they're called, but they actually just melt really easily with the scarab gun. And then, like we said, we're optimistic about the final level, the Great Journey, because we spent a lot of time in Uprising, which shares the same overall map, though to be fair, we barely spent that much time in the map, so it is possible that the Great Journey could be a big roadblock in this final arc of trying to see what is and isn't possible. And then, of course, Gravemind, which if you remember that level alone, is incredibly difficult on LASO, and this is going to be like nightmare level on LLASO. So before we even jump into Gravemind and High Charity, we want to make sure that this is actually possible before we just throw ourselves at this over and over and over again. So Gravemind will definitely be the last hurdle that we have to overcome, because seriously, this stuff is getting kind of out of hand. We've already sent Dim off on the quest to try to beat Quarantine Zone almost LLASO solo, so we'll have to report back to see what he figures out and whether it crashes on him in the solo run. But until then, we will keep grinding away at this. This has been interesting to say the least. We've kind of failed at completing this already, but we can undo our fail if we can make progress in the future. It's just, we spent so much time working on this already, we kind of wanted to continue to keep you guys updated in where our head's at when it comes to Halo 2 LLASO. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe for more videos like this. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.